Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today it is the 1st of October and we have a lot of news. I'm only going to be talking about the Liman front today because not much really happened elsewhere and this is the most pressing part of the front line. So I'm going to go over what happened yesterday first and then I will move over to the events that happened over the past few hours. So let's start off with what the situation was last time that I recorded the video. So basically, at the time, there was clashes around Drobysheve over here, and the Ukrainians, specifically the 81st Air Mobile Brigade, they had just recently taken Novoselivka, and they were pushing towards Derylove, which is over here. I'm circling it. And there were assaults in the direction of Stavki, and a failed attack on Zarichny, and at the same time, units from the 66th Brigade, 79th Brigade, in the area just south of Liman, they were attacking over here incessantly, especially during the nighttime. And right after I recorded my video, actually, there was confirmation that the Ukrainians had taken Yampil, really without a fight. The Russians just withdrew from there. And so Liman really was in a horrible situation at the time because not only was it being attacked from the north, from the south, and then from the east as well, but there were concurrent assaults going on in Zarichny. And Zarichny is really the only town connecting Liman to the roads that lead to Kremmina and then to the rest of the Russian logistics as a whole. So, with the fall of Yampil, the Ukrainians, they would just need to go up this road over here that I'm coloring in red, and they could just flank Zarichny from the north and the south. And then in that way, they would be able to encircle not only Liman, but whatever garrison of troops was stationed in Zarichny or in between. So that was a very dire situation for the Russians, and they did try to offset this by sending in reinforcements, specifically from the 58th Army and from the 20th Army. So a lot of those people were sent over in the past few days, specifically to garrison around the road from Svatove to Kremmina, but also around the road from Kremmina to Zarichny and Liman itself. So they were able to sort of stabilize the situation for a few hours, and that was very crucial because there was a very big chance that Liman would have gotten encircled. And some sources do say that it was encircled, but I would dispute this. The thing about Liman is that the troops in this city, I will talk about which units they're from. So you had Bars 16. Bar 16 was operating around Drobysheve over here, this town, and around Derylove. As I talked about before, it was pushed back by the 81st Air Mobile Brigade, so they had to withdraw to the northern parts of Liman. Then in the center, you had Bars 13, another one of these reserve units, which have some training, but not the same as the regular army. Now, you also had some LPR units that were very crucial in holding the line. So you had the 119th LPR Regiment stationed in this area, and you also had the 752nd Guards Motor Rifle Regiment, which was important in holding the line in southern Liman and preventing breakthroughs over there for a few days. And so all these troops, they were coordinating, holding the line, but all around them, the front line was really collapsing. So Stavki, that was taken, and there were some rumors about the fighting there going back and forth with like the Russians recapturing it and Ukraine pushing into the just like northern outskirts of Liman. But at this point, it's sort of clear that Ukraine took it. We have a video here, a geolocation of the AFU entering Stavki. We also have this video of the 81st Air Mobile Brigade, as I said again, in Drobysheve. And then we got news from earlier today that the armed forces of Ukraine were on the outskirts of Liman. And so this video is geolocated to over here, right next to this junction of two supply hubs, the train and this road. And so they were able to enter Liman really without a fight. Most of the fighting for the past 20 days has been on the outskirts, but there was really not that much urban battles in Liman because really the Russians, they saw the writing on the wall. They did try to hold out for as long as possible, and at the last moment in the nick of time, right before they would have been completely cut off, they did evacuate. And the evacuation, it began with, first of all, having the 58th Army fortify the road between Liman to Kremmina, and then they started evacuating the wounded troops. And then just earlier today, they started evacuating the rest of the units, like the Bars 16 and Bars 13, and then some of the LPR units, like the 208th unit. I forgot if it was a battalion or a regiment, but that's a part of the DPR grouping. So they were also present in Liman. And so they were able to withdraw and mostly intact, although they did leave some heavy equipment. Specifically, there were some T-72B3 variants that were captured by Ukraine over the past few days, and that is really the latest prototype of the T-72. There were also some T-80 tanks and MSTA-B 152 millimeter howitzers, and I'm sure there was much more equipment that I'm missing, but yeah, a lot of it was abandoned in Liman. Liman was a pretty big stronghold for Russia, and they did amass a lot of equipment in here, although they didn't use it as a defensive posture. The equipment stationed here was meant to be sent out to other parts of the front line, so there weren't really defensive fortifications around here, but you did have a lot of military equipment, specifically around the train station, because this train hub was very important to Russia. They would use it to fortify, not fortify, but supply the Kharkiv front over here around Balaklia originally, and then also around Izium, and also around Bohorodichny and the bridgehead that they had just south of the Donets River. So I'll highlight that. And also, of course, around the fighting in Seversk. And so the fall of this hub is a problem for Russian logistics, and now once the train station is restored and could be up and running again, Ukraine will start to use it, of course, and that will improve their logistics situation, which has sort of been hampered by some Russian strikes. Their aviation has been working a lot, especially during the night, and it did play a part in preventing a massive breakthrough earlier on, but it was insufficient. As we've seen now, the Ukrainians, obviously they've been able to enter Liman. This video is from a while ago, but there was another video of the Ukrainians on the northern outskirts of Liman. They were holding up the flag. I'm pretty sure it was around here, but I don't have the marker for it, so I'm gonna have to add that in after the video. Besides that, as the Ukrainians started to withdraw, they as the Russians started to withdraw, they actually blew up the bridge over here across the Zarabets River, which does imply that they are, first of all, not in Zarychny anymore. In this marker, I have two videos. One is of the bridge being blown up, and the other is Ukrainian drone footage of the Russian columns leaving Zarychny, which does confirm that, yeah, Ukraine is in control of it now. And so the fighting is really now around Torske, which is another one of these towns right next to Dibrova. And the reason why this town specifically is important is because if the Ukrainians actually want to reach Kremmina, which is possible now, they have a pretty good grouping that just took Yampil, the 103rd Lviv Defense Brigade, and the 214th Separate Battalion, and then some Ukrainian Special Forces. They're all in this area. So let's say now they move up to Zarychny from here, and they have to either restore the bridge somehow or build some pontoon bridge. Once they do that and they take Torske, there's really not much in the way of Kremmina. And the reason why going from the forest into Kremmina is difficult is because, one, how are you going to move a lot of the mobile units and the vehicles and the heavy equipment through the forest? It's very difficult, especially in the dense forests and very muddy terrain. So the best idea would have been to circumvent it by taking Torske and then Dibrova, which would be very easy. It's a very small town with men stationed there. And from there, the road would just be open to Kremmina. Ukraine already does have not total fire control, but they are firing pretty heavily on the road over here to Kremmina. And so the movement of troops is going to be very difficult. And the Russians in Kremmina, they are suffering now. They're getting battered heavily by the Ukrainian artillery, and they're within the range of a lot of the MLRS systems, and they have been for a while, but now they're going to get battered especially. And so the battles around Kremmina will be very interesting. We're going to have to see if Russia holds on like they did in Liman, or if they find some new defensive line to be stationed around. But really, it seems as if Ukraine is breaking into the operational depth of the Russian forces. They have been able, since the fall of Izium, to take around advance 25 miles, which is a lot, and then Kremmina is about 36 miles away from the initial Ukrainian advance across the Oskil River. So that is very important to note. And with the fall of Kremmina, you would see actual attempts by Ukraine to first take Rubizhny and then actually Severodonetsk, and that's a very huge problem for Russia. These are some of the largest cities that they've taken in the entire war, and just losing all of that would disrupt a lot of the connections with whatever troops are operating in the Seversk front and in the rest of the Donbass. So the situation is very dire, which is why Russia has been moving in reserves over the past few days. But it was not enough to defend Liman. It might be enough to hold a second defensive line around the Zarabets River. There are already rumors that Ukraine has crossed the Zarabets River around Terny and Polivka, but I don't believe this. There's no evidence of a pontoon bridge being constructed yet. But for now, the demarcation line is around the Zarabets River. And at least according to Russian sources, the amount of Ukrainian troops operating in this entire area is around 10,000. So they would have the manpower advantage until more reserves can be sent from the 58th, 20th armies and from other front lines, because I'm sure now you're going to see at least some movement of the Russian troops around Seversk to the front line around Zarabets River, specifically from O Group. You've already seen a lot of the units from O Group being moved into this area, and I believe that will continue. Although I don't think we'll see Wagner move in, because they act semi-independently from the Russian command, because they have their own objectives in Bakhmut, so they would continue with that. And so we're going to have to just wait and see what happens over here. The Ukrainians, they have the initiative, and if they can continue to push forward, I would say crossing the Zarabets River, potentially that could happen around Makivka, and then from Makivka to Svatove is actually a very short ride, and Svatove itself is being threatened now, and its supplies can be cut off. It's within the range of shelling, so it is a very difficult situation for the Russians. The good thing that, and the silver lining for the Russians, which I do have to mention just to give them some credit, is that one, they were able to hold out with a very small units that were not the best trained units, like the BARS units. They were just reservists. They were able to hold out for 20 days in Liman against some pretty formidable Ukrainian troops, a lot of them being sent in from Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, Bohorodichny, Izium, Balaklia, battle-hardened troops that had some good experience, not only from this war, but from the Donbass war. And so they were able to hold on for a while, especially with a lack of ammo and just being constantly shelled and attacked all day. And they just had less men in general, so that's why they ended up losing. But they were able to hold on for a while. And they were able to also withdraw without getting many of their men captured. I know there were a lot of Ukrainian sources saying that about 5,000 Russian troops were surrounded in Liman, but these numbers are very high. I would say that in terms of the amount of troops stationed in Liman, it was probably closer to 2,000, and that's just because the units, they were not at their full capacity. So even if you looked at the remnants of the 10th Army that lost in Izium, they're not at full capacity. Sure, they may be stationed in Liman, and on paper they might have many troops, but in reality, a lot of those men, they're not fighting anymore. So yes, they were really outmanned in this instance, and they were able to hold on for a while despite that fact. And they were even able to withdraw to a new defensive line without that much of losses. And in terms of Ukrainian losses, we don't really have a concrete number, but Russian sources, and again, this is what they're saying, I can't confirm this, they're saying that there were about 1,000 Ukrainian casualties, so that includes dead and wounded. I don't know if that's true, but I would say that yes, there were probably a lot of Ukrainian casualties, given the fact that they were attacking constantly into Liman, and we heard a lot of the time how they failed to break through, especially in the south. And I talked about how the Russian Air Force struck a lot of their positions in this area. So yes, certainly they suffered a lot of casualties. The reason why this was offset is because a lot of the reserves were moved in from the previous fighting around Kharkov. Not the units from the 92nd and 93rd mechanized brigades, they're operating elsewhere right now, but you did have some other units like that were fighting around Izium, Balaklia, moved in to help end this all. Also, you had a lot of troops moved in from Seversk and Solidar, so that's another important thing to note. So, looking into the future, what's going to happen next? Well, the Russians, they already have begun their mobilization, and so once that mobilization is complete, and that could really vary, we have a general idea that it could happen within months or maybe several weeks. But once these reserves start to trickle in, that will free up a lot of the professional Russian regular forces to actually fight on the front lines. So undoubtedly they're going to try to at least recapture Liman at some point in the future, because Liman is a part of Donbass. It's a large city. It is very important to Donetsk in general. So if they actually want to have the entirety of Donetsk in Russia, which clearly they do, they just annexed the Donetsk and Lugansk regions. So now they're actually fighting in Russian territory. At least according to the Russians' view, they're now trying to recapture land that is theirs, because all this blue polygon, that's Russian territory in the Russians' view. So it's a totally different perspective at this point. And so this opens up the opportunity for more troops to be sent in, more fierce airstrikes, all of that. And so it will be interesting to see what happens. In the meanwhile, though, Ukraine does still have the initiative, and so we're going to have to look into the future to see what happens in Kremmina and then even Svatove, as the Ukrainians are breaking through around Kupiansk and around Porichny. And then you could see attacks on Svatove from several directions. So that's all possible, but it's going to happen in the future. But for now, thank you all for watching, and I will see you later.